Last week I talked about in a video how a lot of people right now are taking on debt to be able to go on vacation this summer. Well, I actually found a follow-up story to this showing how long it's actually going to take people to pay off this debt. And this is really the most alarming part of this story, because the reality is, guys, nobody should be taking on credit card debt at these interest rates today. You know, I showed you a couple days ago from one of my viewers, Shirley. She sent me her most recent statement from the Macy's card showing that they're charging basically a 35% interest rate right now. And even though that might be a one-off, most credit cards are close to 30% right now. Usually their highest interest rates that they're charging are anywhere between 20 and 30%, and Macy's takes the cake. The problem is too many people are going out and taking on this debt just for vacation, and they're not able to pay it off. According to a recent survey from Wallet Hub, they found out that 46% of people who did this last year are still paying off that credit card debt, guys. So 46%, that's almost half of the ones who took on this debt a year ago to go on a trip and are still paying it off today. So those people have been paying pretty much record high interest rates for the past year on this debt just to go out and have a little bit of fun, which is probably like the dumbest thing you can do financially right now, but millions are doing it. Right now they say that just the average rate on the credit card is 21.5%, okay? But in May of 2020, it was 14.5%. So basically a whole 6 percentage points higher than it was just a few years ago. And even that 14.5% is still a lot, guys. But this is just crazy numbers that people are paying just to go have a little bit of fun. You pretty much have a split group of people when it comes to credit cards. And I'm in the first group, which is that somebody who uses their credit cards for everything, including vacations or whatever you buy, and then you pay off the bill each month. And according to Market Watch, this is what about half of credit card users do. So you have half the people who are very responsible, use it as a tool to actually, get you free points or get you free flights, get cash back, whatever it is that your card offers. And other people just use it irresponsibly and continue to load up the debt. In a recent bank rate survey, people who carry the credit card debt, here's what they said. 19% of them said they've had this debt for at least 1 to 2 years, 11% for 2 to 3 years, 11% for 3 to 5 years, and 17% for 5 years or more, guys. 17% of people taking more than 5 years to pay off this credit card debt and just hanging on to it like it's no big deal, paying that interest every month, is literally killing them financially. Honestly, this is the worst news that I've heard in a while, because it just confirms that these numbers we're hearing about the economy, people taking on record amounts of credit card debt, and how inflation is, killing everyone's wallet, is not a myth. It's actually true. The worst part is people are doing this over things they don't even need. I know some people are using their credit cards for their needs right now, but a lot of them are just doing it because they want to go on a trip. I mean, even the people that are taking a year or two to pay off vacation debt at over a 20% interest rate are getting completely robbed. In fact, at today's interest rates, someone who only makes the minimum payment towards the average credit card balance, which is about $6,200, they would have that debt for 18 years, and they would end up paying $9,300 in interest over that 18 years. So theoretically, it's possible to pay off that credit card debt, making the minimum payment, but you're going to pay more than double what you initially charged. And that's assuming you're not using the card anymore. You're just not adding any extra money to that card, and it will take you 18 years to do it. And that makes me also wonder, if you have 46% of people still paying off last summer's credit card debt for their trip, how many of those people are actually taking on additional credit card debt this year to go on vacation again? Probably a good amount of them, because bad spending habits die hard, right? It's not easy to stop doing things like this, especially if it's your only means of doing it. Especially younger people, they're basically doing all this doom spending. That's what you could basically boil this down to, and saying, I'm going to spend all my money on a vacation right now because things are so bad in this economy and for my financial life that it won't make any difference if I start saving today, which actually isn't true, but I can see how someone can arrive at that conclusion because of how hopeless you might feel. But the reality is, if that's you, you have to start somewhere. You have to start saving some money, even if it's $50 in a savings account, guys. That is better than zero, and it's a start. And if you keep contributing to it, it will add up, it will snowball, and you will end up having more money than you thought you would after a year's time is over. And when they talk to the younger generations, millennials and Gen Zs who are taking on debt this summer, guess what the average amount that they're planning on taking on? An extra $4,000 in credit card debt to be able to do all this doom spending and doom traveling, whatever you want to call it, guys. And the average credit card balance is only $6,200. And when I read this story, it just really reinforces how little people, actually track their finances or look at how much things cost. Because again, I can't believe it, guys. I just run into these guys everywhere. They followed me all the way from Florida. But one thing that these younger people said that they're going to do to save money, supposedly on these trips, right, is instead of flying, they're going to be taking road trips instead. Well, as somebody who's driven across the country a few times already, let me tell you guys, it's not really cheaper. Maybe 30 years ago it was, or 20 years ago, but now I would argue that it's actually cheaper to fly than it is to drive. With where gas prices are, if you stop at hotels and you stop and eat food, maybe you could make it cheaper if you pack your car full of people instead of things and everyone splits the costs, including all the food and the hotel and the fuel expenses, all that stuff. If you do that with a group of friends in one car, then maybe it would be cheaper than flying, yeah. But it's just like a couple, like me and Lizzie, for example, it is not cheaper, guys. In fact, the airline prices have been kind of coming down over the past few months, and it's cheaper to fly than you think it would be. But what it shows you is that these guys just aren't doing the math. They're not looking at, hey, is this actually cheaper? They're just assuming that it will be, which is yet another bad financial habit they have. I saw another story today talking about how inflation is continuing to moderate and how everybody should be happy and celebrating this right now. But the crazy thing is, even if inflation is moderating, which so far it looks like it isn't, it's still going in the wrong direction. It's still higher than what the Fed wants it to be. But let's just play along and assume what they're saying is correct, right? One thing that they say here in this story is that the monthly food at home inflation has been at 0% for the past 4 months, according to the latest government data. So even if that's true, right, and inflation's at 0% for food over the past 4 months, the food prices that have already gone up during the pandemic are permanent. You're not seeing a reduction in food prices. It's just kind of flatlined. It's stuck where it is. It went up 30% during the pandemic, 50%, and it's stuck. And that's just something that a lot of people don't understand, is that a reduction in inflation doesn't mean prices are coming down. And these high prices that we see with everything, especially food, are here to stay. We're not going to see it get reversed. And I think that's a big problem, because so many people who don't understand this are thinking that they're going to see some price relief on things like this in the near future. That somehow, their utility bill is going to go down, or their grocery bill is going to go down, or the cost to fill up their car with gas or electricity is going to go down. But in fact, whatever it is today is likely what it's going to remain at, if not get even more expensive, because inflation is still a problem. Housing inflation has basically been flat. We've been seeing the rents come down a little bit, and home prices are coming down too in some markets, but it's nowhere near enough to make housing affordable. They talk about here how gasoline prices fell 3.6% from month to month from April to May. And somehow that's supposed to, make it extremely affordable to go out and drive now. Well, it doesn't, guys. As a result of this, people are still seeing their monthly costs, their budget to operate their household go up and not down. This leads to things like people taking on record amounts of credit card debt and buy now, pay later loans and everything else to survive. In fact, 61% of Americans are now reporting that they're spending more on groceries and dining out compared to 1 year ago. People are reporting that on average their costs rose $209.45 a month on average, okay? In just 1 year. They also found out that 56% of adults said they now spend $161 more a month on utilities, and 48% said their rent costs an additional $303 a month compared to last year. So it looks like for most people, inflation is still raging, okay? To see those amount of increases, like $300 a month in rent, $200 more in food, and $160 more in utilities. For anybody who's been adding that up, that's an extra $600 a month that these households have to fork over just to make ends meet. And imagine how many people are putting this additional cost of living on the credit card, especially at, 21.5% average interest rates. And that's just the average, meaning that there's a lot of people that have higher interest rates than that too, especially if you have a Macy's card. But you know what? Luckily, since we have access to data, we don't actually have to guess how many people are taking on this kind of debt in order to make those expenses, because we have a chart right here that shows how many people are doing it, okay? And what you can see is this chart shows you the total credit card debt in the United States through the first quarter of 2024, guys. And what do you notice? Since 2022, it absolutely ballooned, okay? I mean, even in 2020, during the pandemic, when it was bad and people were in desperate need of money and not really sure where they were going to get their next paycheck from, it didn't even crack $950 billion then. And now we are on the doorstep of close to 1.2 trillion now. I mean, the numbers are astronomical. We also had the latest data come out from the New York Fed reporting that 9% of credit card balances went delinquent in May of 2024. And I'm willing to bet that that delinquency rate is going to continue to ever so slightly tick up throughout the rest of the year as people continue to struggle with the higher cost of living. And honestly, I just can't wait to see how our government and the Fed is going to handle these issues, because I'm pretty sure, like 99% sure, that no matter what they do, it's not going to matter. The government is already doing all these things they can to try to further stimulate the economy, giving people free money, different grants and loan programs to get people to invest in housing at the worst time ever, things like that. It's not working, right? So all of their efforts are being thwarted by the high cost of living, and it doesn't really matter what they do at this point moving forward. The Fed, they're stuck. Doesn't matter if they raise interest rates or lower them or keep them the same, because either inflation is going to be an issue moving forward or a giant recession will be an issue moving forward. So they don't have any good moves left in the tank. But don't worry, guys, because AI and all the illegal immigrants coming in and rich people are going to prevent this recession. At least that's what a recent story from Business Insider said. So let's take a look at this. Before we get into it, just my initial impression of that is there is maybe some grain of truth in this, because these are major disruptors, right? AI is continuing to be a major disruptor with the stock market and people's jobs and how we work, things like that. Immigration seems to be never ending. We're getting all these people pouring into this country that contribute to higher inflation and the higher cost of living for everybody, but does contribute to a booming economy as well. And we also have a lot of rich people, probably more than ever before. People who have been able to capitalize on these recent trends in technology and the economy, and they're doing well. Okay, so those people all need to and will spend money into this economy, but is it going to be enough to keep it propped up moving forward? Now, keep in mind, this is all one guy's opinion. State Street Chief Investment Strategist Michael Aroney is the one who said that these people are going to be the ones propping up the economy moving forward. His first thing that he said is that even if the Fed keeps interest rates in restrictive territory, which they're not in restrictive territory, because if they were, nobody would be financing anything, which it's working a little bit with the car market and the housing market, but not to the extent we need it to. It's definitely not working with personal debt. According to him, he says that recent studies show that AI can improve productivity across a wide range of jobs between 20 to 80%. So that's going to help companies, increase their bottom line and make more money, and that will help out with GDP and things like that. But what this doesn't really address is how many people are actually going to lose their jobs to AI, and maybe those companies might do well and their shareholders might do well, but what about all the people that currently work there? That's kind of up in the air still. And then of course there is immigration. This guy Michael Aroney says that many people underappreciate the role that increasing immigration has played in stabilizing the post-pandemic labor market without further flattering inflation pressures. Well, it is making inflation go higher because it makes it harder for people to find a place to live. We have more money chasing the same amount of goods, so it does increase inflation. To say that it doesn't is just a flat out lie. But his excuse for this of why, immigration actually helps lower inflation is because one thing we saw is wage inflation soar during the pandemic. And so people were making a lot more money during this time. They were getting big raises. But because of all the immigration we've been having, like for example, in 2023 alone, we had 1.5 million people come into the country, then it increases competition for jobs. It makes it so that people are not getting these massive pay raises anymore. So it, in turn, is supposedly good for inflation, but not acknowledging the other side of this, where you have just more and more people chasing the same amount of goods and services, which also increases inflation. And when people spend more money, it increases inflation. And he says another thing that's going to keep us out of a recession is the fact that a lot of these job openings are being taken by the immigrants that are coming in. This is going to further boost the labor market because those jobs are going to continue to be filled by people pouring into this country. So that's going to be a good thing for our economy. And listen, guys, I'm not blaming illegal immigrants for coming in here. If I was, stuck in one of these terrible places, I would want to come here too. And I would probably do whatever it took to get here and spend every last dollar I had to get here. Okay, so I don't blame them for coming. You have to blame our government for letting them come without any credentials or vetting or things like that. And then finally, of course, rich people are going to save this economy. He says that high-end consumers are in great shape. For all the rising concerns about delinquency rates and the more than $1 trillion in credit card debt, he says that this doesn't matter because you have a good chunk of the US population in strong financial shape. And that's important because people who earn 150 grand or more per year are responsible for 40% of US consumer spending. And I covered this in a video when I was still in Illinois. That's where the term selective recession comes from, because people who are doing well financially like that and are responsible for half the spending can make it look like things are really good while the rest of the population is hurting. Because it's not like everyone's in that category. How many people make over $150,000 a year? What is that, the top 10, 20% of earners in the whole country maybe? But on top of that, rich people got it good right now because they own 85% of the stocks and 80% of the bonds and 2/3 of liquid assets in the country. And they only make up 1/3 of the credit card balances, so they're not hurting when it comes to, how much credit card debt is out there. But never mind the other 2/3 of people that are, keeping their credit card debt for 3 to 5 years, like we talked about earlier. That doesn't matter because he says this demographic is on pace to have their wages grow 5% this year, and they're also expected to increase their spending by 8% this year, which he thinks could be even higher than that if inflation comes down and the stock market and home prices continue to rise. Well, having the stock market and home prices continue to rise is inflationary. So I'm not sure how you have inflation come down, but have the stock market and home prices continue to rise. Those things don't seem to really add up. in my book. But one thing that is true that he said is because people have all-time high stock portfolios and all-time high home equities, as well as higher interest income than ever before, it does give people extra spending power, and it also plays into the wealth effect that makes people feel richer than they really are and willing to spend more than they probably should. So what this guy is saying, that when you add all these things together, this means solid growth for the future of our economy, and it should enable a continued rise in the stock market. And the Fed's restrictive policy is not going to stop the music this time around because the economy is too strong. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about all this. I feel like I understand what he means, and I can see why he thinks this way, but I think he's just missing too many pieces of the puzzle to assume that, this is all going to be enough to keep the economy going. Maybe he's right, guys. These are all just guesses and predictions, I've had guesses and predictions that are wrong. I'm sure this guy has as well, too. Everybody has. So he very well could be right about this. But the part that never adds up to me, that I think is going to bring this down in the end, is you can't have, 20% of the population doing well and 80% struggling to make ends meet and call that a successful economy, or to think that that's going to be sustainable and kind of last forever. Because when the vast majority of people can't spend money on regular items, in the long run, that's going to hurt spending. It's going to hurt property values because people won't be able to afford these prices. 20% of the population cannot buy everything, essentially, is what I'm getting at. Even now, the richest people only account for 40% of the spending, which means that the poorest people account for 60%, which is more than half. And as those people continue to struggle, then they're not going to be able to keep spending that money. And the rich people are not going to come in and make up the difference. So ultimately, we will suffer from this, is what I'm thinking. Just a matter of when, not if. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I hope you've been enjoying these California walks. I know I sure have. It's only like 71 degrees out here today. I'm in heaven. I'm not in Miami getting soaked in the pouring rain or dying from a heat stroke. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.